The public is conditioned to look at the sky. Media reports, like those questioning missile defense relevance to a World Cup, frame global security as a visible high-tech spectacle. This is a deliberate misdirection. The primary vector of attack is not a hypersonic launch. It is absolute, systemic silence. The global economy runs on light, pulsed through a network of undersea cables. These are the physical representation of the dollar system, the core liability of the American empire. Warnings of de-dollarization and a U.S. fiscal crisis are not abstract economic forecasts. They are the motive. According to CSIS, state-level actors now possess the deep-sea capabilities to sever these connections with plausible deniability. This is not about disrupting the internet. It is a direct assault on financial liquidity and national solvency. Simultaneously, a second asymmetric vector targets the nation's eyes: satellite blinding. A coordinated electronic or low-orbit kinetic attack renders GPS, intelligence, and secure communications inert. A report from RUSI outlines the low kinetic cost and high strategic impact of such an attack. The objective is not just to disable hardware, it is to sever the connection between the brain and the body, creating total paralysis in situational awareness. A superpower stripped of its financial nervous system and its strategic vision becomes a blind leviathan. When its primary tools of global leverage, its currency, and its debt are neutralized, what remains? It cannot issue sanctions if the financial system is dark. It cannot de-escalate with economic leverage it no longer possesses. It is mathematically compelled to respond using its primary remaining strength, its kinetic arsenal. A solvency crisis is therefore not an economic event. It is the launch-on warning protocol for global conflict. The motive for systemic warfare is not conquest, it is survival. When a state's internal balance sheet is collapsing, war ceases to be a foreign policy tool and becomes a domestic solvency protocol. It is the final, desperate transaction to prevent a national default. Consider the Russian Federation. CSIS analysis, echoing previous Forbes reporting, identifies the primary vector of its systemic risk. A prolonged, unpopular war functions as an accelerating domestic liability. It drains capital, erodes political stability, and exposes the core fragility of the state's finances. The Kremlin is not just fighting a war in Ukraine, it is fighting a war against its own insolvency. This internal weakness mathematically compels a pivot to asymmetry. When you cannot afford the symmetric costs of conventional conflict, you are forced to find cheaper alternative forms of leverage. This is not a strategic choice, it is a financial imperative. Leaked decrees from Georgia confirm this blueprint. Russia's surge in gas exports southward is a non-kinetic, asymmetric maneuver designed to generate liquidity and offset the catastrophic financial bleed from its military operations. This is the universal mechanism. A state facing a solvency crisis operates under a different calculus. Its primary objective is no longer growth, but staving off collapse. Lacking the financial ammunition to fight on economic terms, as its debt and currency are targeted, it is cornered. Its response is pre-programmed. Escalate to a domain where it retains supremacy. This is why a fiscal crisis is the trigger for a kinetic event. It is a launch-on warning protocol for a bankrupt system. The core calculation driving modern conflict is no longer about troop numbers or industrial output. It is about the economics of lethality. The Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, provides the baseline numbers. A $5 million main battle tank can be neutralized, its asset value liquidated, by a $500 first-person view drone. This is not a market inefficiency. It is a permanent inversion of the kinetic cost curve. For decades, battlefield dominance was a function of capital expenditure. Victory belonged to the system that could produce the most expensive, most sophisticated hardware. That monopoly on high-cost force projection has been broken. Analysts at institutions like CSIS define this as the democratization of violence. The term is clinical. It signifies that the ability to destroy high-value state assets is no longer exclusive to superpowers. It has been distributed to smaller state and non-state actors, accessible for the cost of consumer electronics. When a superpower enters a solvency crisis, its currency and debt instruments under systemic attack, it loses the financial leverage to absorb these asymmetric costs. It cannot afford a 10,000 to 1 negative return on its kinetic investments. The mathematical imperative is to abandon the failing symmetric model and escalate to a domain where it retains overwhelming dominance, a strategic, launch-on-warning posture. The legacy media presents global chaos as a series of unrelated, spontaneous fires. This is a fundamental misreading of the terrain. These are not fires, they are laboratories. The regional instability reported from the Caucasus to the developing world is a network of gray zones, proxy environments designed for a single purpose, to test and refine the weapons for a full-spectrum economic war. Consider the operational blueprint revealed in Georgia. A leaked 2025 state decree, confirmed by Gazprom's own data, shows Russian gas supply surging 40.4%. This is not a commercial transaction, it is the successful deployment of an energy vector to engineer dependency, establishing a protocol for systemic leverage. The objective is not profit, it is control. This is a scalable model. According to analysts at CSIS, these gray zone operations serve as rehearsals. They allow an adversary to stress test financial and logistical choke points on a small scale before targeting the core system. The playbook perfected in Tbilisi is designed for deployment against a G7 economy. This isn't a mistake. It's a feature of asymmetric warfare. While these proxy battles unfold, the primary assault vector is activated. As market analysts like Peter Schiff have documented, the de-dollarization architecture advanced by BRICS is the culmination of these tests. The strategic accumulation of hard metals is not a hedge. It is the ammunition for an attack on the West's central liability, its currency. This is the main event the gray zones were preparing for. A solvency crisis is the engineered outcome. When an adversary successfully targets a superpower's debt and currency, symmetric financial retaliation becomes impossible. The state loses its primary leverage. As RUSI reports suggest, the strategic space becomes a zero-sum game. Lacking economic options, the system is mathematically compelled to escalate using its last remaining strength, its kinetic arsenal. The tripwire for global conflict is not a border. It is a balance sheet hitting zero. The launch-on-warning protocol is not a strategy, it is a mathematical function. When incoming strategic assets are detected, the response is automated. There is no committee. There is no debate. The flight time of a modern hypersonic weapon is shorter than a human decision cycle. The protocol exists to preempt decapitation. The critical liability, however, is not the missile. It is the radar. CSIS reports confirm that the entire early warning system, from satellite uplinks to ground-based radar arrays, is a primary target for cyber warfare. This creates the fog of digital war. An adversary does not need to launch a $1 trillion nuclear strike. They need only execute a $10 million cyber attack that simulates one. If the radar is blind, or worse, if it is fed false positives, the commander on duty faces a zero-sum choice. Does he trust his screen and initiate a counter-launch, triggering global conflict? Or does he doubt the data and risk the complete annihilation of his nation in under 30 minutes? The protocol is designed to eliminate this choice. Fear compels the launch. The system is engineered to escalate. This is the essence of asymmetric escalation. As a nation's financial power wanes, as documented by warnings of a U.S. fiscal crisis or the advance of de-dollarization, its adversaries are incentivized to pivot from symmetric economic competition to asymmetric kinetic triggers. The kinetic cost of the cyber attack is near zero. The kinetic cost of the response is terminal. A calibration shot is not an act of war. It is a mathematical input. Its purpose is to measure an adversary's response protocols under duress. While legacy media focuses on BRICS announcements and de-dollarization warnings, the operational blueprint is being tested elsewhere. In Georgia, Russia demonstrated the protocol: secure energy dominance, then use information warfare, like the unauthorized publication of a state decree, to generate systemic instability. This is not a regional tactic, it is a scalable model. The United States' primary liability is no longer abstract fiscal policy. It is the physical infrastructure that underwrites its petrodollar dominance. An adversary does not need to sink an aircraft carrier if it can close a port. The kinetic cost is lower, the attribution is deniable, and the economic impact is immediate. The objective is to force a solvency crisis that cannot be resolved with liquidity injections, leaving only a launch-on warning military posture. The calibration forecast. Within the next 12 months, anticipate a targeted multi-day system failure at a critical U.S. energy export hub. The Port of Houston is the logical target. The event will be a sophisticated cyber-physical attack executed during a period of maximum public distraction, such as a major global sporting event. It will be officially attributed to non-state actors or catastrophic software error. The actual purpose is to measure the precise time it takes for a financially leveraged superpower to escalate from a domestic emergency to a kinetic military footing. This is the final data point required before triggering a full-spectrum assault on U.S. debt.